Hey, before I begin, wherever you are, whether you're in this room or online or at any one of our other campuses, can we just give it up one more time for Glenn and Virginia Baptist? It's extremely cool. The partnership that we get to be in with them is amazing. It has helped our church go for really the whole time. So thank you so much, Glenn and Virginia Baptist. A few months ago, a few good friends and I were hanging out in my house while the TV was on in the background. Now, none of us were really watching it. It sort of served as some white noise because I love them, but my friends get awkward when there's a lull in the conversation. So just having the TV sound happening, bridging the gap, helps. Maybe you can relate. Anyway, we were chatting, having a good time, when out of the corner of my eye, I saw an ad on the screen for a movie that was about to drop in theaters called Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Now, I'm not totally sure why I had such a visceral reaction to this trailer, but the moment I saw it playing, I rolled my eyes so hard. I was like, why? Like, who asked for another Puss in Boots movie? I just said the word another, and some of you didn't even know there was a first one, okay? Can we please stop? I was like unreasonably mad about this, and again, I'm not totally sure why. Now, if you don't know, Puss in Boots is the cat over there on the end with the hat on. Anyway, he's a swashbuckling vigilante cat from the Shrek movies, who is essentially an homage to Zorro, both of which are played by Antonio Banderas, coincidentally. Now, if you don't know who Zorro is, then, well, ask your mom or grandma, because one of them probably had a crush on Zorro at one point. But in 2011, 7 years after his big screen debut in Shrek 2, they decided to give Puss in Boots his own movie because he had become a fan favorite. However, as it happens with most spin-offs, even though it was well received, the first one didn't live up to expectations, and the production studio sort of cut their losses and left the spin-off idea alone. That is until December of last year, when they released Puss in Boots: The Last Wish in theaters. Now, giving you that context doesn't actually help you understand why I was so upset about this, I know. But it at least lets me tell you that there was no way I was going to waste money or time catching this reboot of a spinoff. And I would have silently judged anyone who did. Okay, I'm just kidding. Kind of. But anyway, a couple months go by. I've already forgotten this movie existed, but ads for it start popping up on all my devices. And reviews for the movie start populating my YouTube feed because my phone heard me talking about it. And guess what? Your phone is hearing me talk about it right now. So after today, you're going to start seeing Puss in Boots ads on your devices. You're welcome, or sorry, whatever. Anyway, I start seeing the title of these reviews, and much to my surprise, they're really good. Like, over the top good. Best animated movie I've seen in a decade. Moving, touching, inspirational, hilarious from start to finish. You won't believe how good this movie is. Like, all the reviews are like that. Now, I didn't actually watch or read any of these reviews because these are just the opinions of random people on the internet. So I wasn't convinced, but I was now curious, right? They might all be random people, but they all seem to agree that this movie is for real. Eventually, though, I saw a review from a guy whose reviews I trust, and he said the same thing. You gotta see this movie. Okay, fine. I'll go check it out. Puss in Boots. So one night, about a month ago, my wife was working, my kids were asleep, so I watched Puss in Boots: The Last Wish by myself. Online, in the very same living room where I had trashed it just a few months earlier, watched it start to finish. I don't know. You have got to see this movie, okay? I have never been more wrong about a movie in my life. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish was anything but a generic reboot of a spinoff. It was a poignant, heartfelt, shockingly deep story. And I'm serious about the fragility of life. Cherishing the things and people we have rather than seeking the next thing. Some of you are laughing because you don't believe me, but trust me. And it's also about the difference having people around you who truly know you and how that can make a difference in your life. Not only that, but the animation itself, gorgeous. The voice acting, world class. I legit cannot get over how good Puss in Boots is, okay? And that's the thing. I could not have fully known just how good this movie was had I not gone and seen it for myself. I mean, no amount of positive reviews, opinions, or stories would have given me the full scope of its greatness. I had to see it with my own eyes. And that's how it is with everything in our life, isn't it? Whether it's a movie suggestion, book review, restaurant recommendation, until we go experience these things for ourselves, we'll never genuinely know what they're like. And that's especially true when it comes to our faith. We tell stories all the time around PCC about the life change people are experiencing as a result of everything God is doing through us. And we tell them not so we can brag on ourselves, but so that you might hear them and become curious and maybe start to think, is that really what's going on here? That sounds awesome. Maybe I should check it out. Maybe I should see how I can be a part of it. Because there's a monumental difference between hearing the stories about life change and being a part of making them happen. One makes you curious. The other makes you a believer. One might change your mind, but the other changes everything. And Jesus knew this all too well, which is why he went out of his way to show anyone who would come with him the transformative work he was doing in people's lives, rather than just telling them about it. Like in John chapter 1, we find a simple but beautiful interaction between him and Andrew, one of his first disciples. Now, just to give you some quick context, before Andrew became a disciple of Jesus, he was a disciple of a guy named John the Baptizer. Now, we call him that because he's the guy who baptized Jesus. And because John spent so much time prophesying about Jesus' arrival, Andrew had been hearing story after story, day after day, night after night about Jesus, until one day, John and his disciples finally see him. And that's where we're going to pick up this story. The following day, John was again standing with two of his disciples. As Jesus walked by, John looked at him and declared, "Look, there is the Lamb of God." When John's two disciples heard this, they followed Jesus. Jesus looked around and saw them following. "What do you want?" he asked them. They replied, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" Now, in response to Andrew's kind of awkward leadoff question, if you really examine it for a second, it's not what we typically ask someone when we first meet them, but he did, he went for it. Anyway, any normal person, any of us would have at best answered this question literally, like, "Oh yeah, I'm staying downtown somewhere, I got a place in Powhatan, I got a place in Farmville, wherever, room with my friend, staying with my parents," just given the information, given the answer to the question. Others of us, probably most of us, would have gently told Andrew that it's none of his business. Of course, Jesus isn't us, and he's not just anybody. So instead of blowing them off or just giving them the information, he invites them to come and see. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when they went with him to the place where he was staying, and they remained with him the rest of the day. Now, if you stop here, this is really just a story about two guys going with Jesus to some house and hanging out for the evening. But it's what happens next that reveals the importance of Jesus' invitation to come and see. Because Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of these men who heard what John said and then followed Jesus. Andrew went to find his brother Simon and told him, "We have found the Messiah." You see, now Andrew gets it. Up to this point, Andrew had only stories to go on about Jesus, prophecies, promises from John the Baptizer. Now, those things certainly made him curious enough to approach Jesus. But it wasn't until Andrew actually accepted his invitation to come and see who Jesus was, where Jesus was, and what Jesus was up to, that it clicked for him. His curiosity changed to belief when he went to see for himself. And while we don't know anything about what was said or done in their time together that day, it's really not the point. The point is right there at the end. See, Andrew went to find his brother Simon and boldly told him, "We have found the Messiah," with assurance. This is what happens when we come to see for ourselves. This is what happens when we take the step to go where Jesus is and see what he's all about. Now, for 20 years, this has been the mission of PCC. Reach people who don't go to church so that we can all experience the fullest lives possible through Jesus. Now, if you put it a different way, we want anyone who feels far from God to come and see that the stories aren't just stories. They're happening all around us all the time. And Jesus didn't just do life-changing things in the past, but he's still doing them today in whoever accepts his invitation. And God has blessed us tremendously, even today, as we all got to witness, by allowing us to facilitate that meeting for thousands of people over the last 20 years. Many of you here today at one of our physical locations, in this room, online, you were those people at one point. But your curiosity about the things you heard compelled you to come and see with your own eyes. And you did. And you've been changed. And that's a blessing for you. It's a blessing for us. It's a blessing for all of us. But what if I told you that some of you, despite coming to know Jesus, still haven't experienced your fullest life possible? What if I told you there was more to the story? Before I get there, let me give 2 disclaimers. The first one, if you're joining us today and this is your first time, or you're still not sure about Jesus, church, faith, anything like that, then what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes doesn't apply to you yet. You can sort of sit back, relax, and take what I'm about to say as information for now. However, should you decide to fully commit to a life of following Jesus, then you'll need to take this information and turn it into action, because it's a big deal. Second disclaimer. As someone who is not in that crowd, who's been a part of PCC for nearly 17 years and officially on staff for 10, I can say with some authority that we haven't always been direct and clear with what I'm about to say, at least not from the Sunday morning platform. I mean, we believe it, we try to live it the best we can, but we've been very careful when it comes to communicating this with you. We're intentional about not pressuring you or trying to force you to do anything as it pertains to your faith journey with Jesus on purpose. It's intentional. You've probably heard us say a bunch of times that we don't want to hijack your spiritual journey. And that's still the truth. It's always going to be the truth. I mean, Jesus has never forced me to do anything. And so who am I to try and force you to do something? Even still, once you commit to following Jesus with your whole life, it does come with some mandatory expectations from Jesus himself. Now, with those disclaimers out of the way, I want to be as direct as I possibly can be. If you say you're a follower of Jesus, meaning you've told Jesus that you want him to be the ruler and commander of your life through a prayer, public commitment like baptism or anything else, if you say you're a follower of Jesus and you don't serve the mission of his church in any way, then you cannot live the fullest life possible. If you say you're a follower of Jesus and you don't serve the mission of his church in any way, then you cannot live the fullest life possible. Period. If you say you're a follower of Jesus and you live that out by coming to church on Sundays, and that's it, then you can't live the fullest life possible. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's part of it, but it's not enough. If you say you're a follower of Jesus and you come to church on Sundays, you attend a small group, that's awesome. But you cannot live the fullest life possible. If you've given your life over to the perfect leadership of Jesus, but you aren't playing an active part in helping him accomplish his mission, bringing the kingdom of heaven to earth by serving in some way, then you are not living the fullest life possible. Now, if this sounds harsh to you, I don't mean it to, but it's not an idea that I made up. It comes straight from the Bible, and it's highlighted in a story about a dying man named Lazarus. Now, you can find this whole story in John chapter 11. I can't encourage you enough to go read the whole thing for yourself, because I'm not going to have time to get to all the amazing details in it. But the story opens telling us that Lazarus, who's a friend of Jesus's, and the brother to 2 women named Mary and Martha, he is deathly ill. Now, Jesus, having the power to heal and raise the dead, assures his disciples that Lazarus is going to be okay. However, it's right after that we find this intriguing line. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister, Mary, and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." It says Jesus loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus. So he didn't leave immediately to go see them. In fact, he stayed put for multiple days. Wow, I think there's some wisdom in there somewhere about how we feel like God should respond to our crises versus what God's plans are, but It's a different conversation for a different day. Just keep this verse in mind as we travel on, continue on now. He went on to tell them, Jesus went on to tell the disciples, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. Now his disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. So innocent. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep, as we all would have, I think. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. I mean, just imagine you're one of the disciples in this moment. I mean, this is shocking, seemingly cold from Jesus just after Lazarus dies. I mean, he tells them that he was glad he wasn't there. Why? So that you may believe. The disciples must have been all sorts of confused and, in this moment. But what else were they going to do? They went with Jesus to Lazarus' tomb. Now, before Jesus and the disciples arrive, we're told that Martha and Mary are being supported and cared for by tons of their friends. And that's really important, so keep that in mind. But once Jesus arrives, Martha runs out to him and says to him, if only you would have been here, Lazarus would still be alive. Now, Jesus tells her what he's been telling his disciples the whole time. Lazarus will rise again. And so, like the disciples, she thinks he means one thing, and she responds, I know he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. And that's not really what Jesus meant. But Jesus does give us a response. And that response starts to peel back the curtain on why Jesus has been making these seemingly odd decisions. Because he said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. So maybe Jesus intentionally waited for Lazarus to die so that everyone who was willing to come and see him would fully understand that he is the one who saves lives. He is the one who, in their time, was going to conquer death, and in our time, conquered death a long time ago. Jesus is the one who can give us life from this moment to forevermore. He wanted them to be there to see that literally in Lazarus' life. But it wasn't only that. He wanted them to play an active role in it as well. Let me show you. This is super cool. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of Lazarus, by this time there's a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. At any point throughout this story, Jesus could have healed Lazarus. Could have said the word from wherever he was, and it would have been done. He didn't need anyone to see it happen. He didn't need anyone's help making it happen. Jesus had the ability to do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted to. But he let Lazarus die and journeyed to the tomb to raise him. Why? Well, the answer is in the small details in that story, and they're the secret as to what makes this an amazing story. See, Jesus did it this way because otherwise, Mary and Martha's friends would have had no reason to comfort them in their lowest moment. If Lazarus would have just gotten better without any sort of warning, these friends would have been deprived of the opportunity to put their arms around these women, sit in heavy silence with them, and remind them by their presence that God was never far from them. Jesus asked people to push the stone away, something he could have done with a wave of the hand. But he asked people to do it anyway. And had he not, they would have lost their chance to get their own hands dirty, flexing and straining their muscles in order to clear the way for Jesus to bring the dead back to life. See, had Jesus done this on his own, these people would have missed the reality-defying picture that was the empty tomb, that they literally had a hand in emptying, which for them was a metaphor for things to come. If Jesus healed Lazarus from afar, the people who helped change Lazarus out of his grave clothes couldn't have put their hands on the physical representation that Jesus Christ is the resurrection and the life. And they couldn't have looked into the eyes of a man who was just dead, smile at him and say, "You're okay. You're alive again." And of course, everyone there that day would have lost the joy it must have been to come and see Jesus do what he does best, bring the dead to life. So instead, Jesus invited them to be a part of the miracle, and their lives changed. Now, this story has been stirring in me lately because it just kind of recently dawned on me. Maybe this story isn't about Lazarus at all, really. I mean, of course, he's the one who was dead and came back to life, but Jesus told us at the beginning that that was going to happen. Like, that was no secret. No, I think it was about everybody else there that day. It's about the life change that happens when you and I say yes to Jesus' invitation to come and see and play a part in what he's already doing in our world. And that's just it, right? We've already established that Jesus doesn't actually need us to do any of it. He's God, he can do what he wants, but out of his love for us, he invites us to play an active role anyway. And it's not because the success of his mission depends on it, because, man, if it did, and he told me to do it, we would have failed a long time ago. But it's because when we serve others through the power and love of Jesus, their lives aren't just changed, we're changed. It literally changes us. Every time I have served, both on staff at PCC and many years before that, this has been my experience. I mean, I've spent the vast majority of my life serving the mission of Jesus, and every single time I get changed for the better. When I was younger, I used to think I was going to help change somebody's life, and although I do still hope that happens, I always come back changed, whether they do or not. Like when I went to Brazil at age 15, I saw families 11 and 12 deep living in homes made out of cardboard boxes with blue tarps for roofs. I mean, their living situation was poverty at a level almost any one of us here can't understand. And yet they were so full of joy just because we would come and talk to them and because of their own love for Jesus. And meanwhile, back home, and this is no offense to anybody who was telling me this, but I'm getting advice from every single angle when I'm 15 to make as much money as possible so you don't have to worry about anything. Get a career that'll let you live comfortably. Then you'll have joy. In my most formative years, Jesus led me to a place, literally led me to a place where he taught me that the key to joy and contentment is in a relationship with him, not a relationship with stuff. It changed my outlook forever, right when I needed it. Or the time I was 18, I went to China where we led worship for nearly 100 people in an outdoor factory courtyard, which at any time could have been broken up by law enforcement and ended with everyone out being there being detained for doing such a thing. We saw 40 people decide to follow Jesus that night. And that was incredible. That's on paper is the reason we went, but God had a different plan for me. What changed in me was seeing every single person there singing at the top of their lungs outside where everyone could hear them, knowing full well they could pay a heavy price for that. It taught me my faith is not something that should ever be hidden. And if they were bold enough to do it with so much risk, then how dare I hold back with almost none? And that's just it. It's a lifetime of experiences like this in every part of the world, following where Jesus leads and saying yes to his invitation that has made me into the person I am today. And y'all, that's not to say that I'm perfect. I am still a work in progress, but I have joy. I have contentment. I have boldness. I have gratitude. I'm at peace. And I'm blessed to have those things right now, but they weren't an accident. They weren't the result of just coming to church on Sundays. It's the product of spending my entire life going and seeing what Jesus is doing in the hearts and minds of people around the globe. And every time I do that, every time I accept the invitation, every time I go somewhere else, Jesus chips away at my heart and my mentality and what I believe. And over the long arc of time, one after another, bit by bit, Jesus forms me into the person that can live the fullest life possible. Because I say yes. And it's the only way you're going to get there, too. Now, the good news is that you don't have to travel out of the country to do this. I mean, there are literally hundreds of ways to do that right here at PCC, starting by joining the Dream Team. So at all of our campuses, in this room, at any of our physical locations, as you leave today, you're going to see several tables full of Dream Team opportunities that you can be a part of. We're making it easier than ever right now to join the incredible work Jesus is doing through PCC. So y'all, if I may, don't just walk by a table today without at least checking out what's going on around here. It'll take you 2 minutes. Because being a part of it, it's not about just recruiting new people for our church. It's so that your life might change as Jesus changes the lives of the people we serve. Today, Jesus is inviting all of us to play an active role in the work he's doing in our church, in our communities, in our nation, and in our world. And if you want to truly experience the fullest life possible, you can't just take my word for it like a movie review. Come and see. Get involved. Don't let yourself be content any longer being a passive listener to the stories we tell. Play an active part in making them happen. Come and see. Turn your curiosity into all-in belief. Stand up, get involved, and watch as Jesus changes everything. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope that you will come back next week as we finish our Now What series. But before then, come and see, check out a table, dive in with us, and let your life be transformed and experience the fullest life possible. Hope you have a great week. See you again soon.
As Elijah said, you have an opportunity to make a difference right now. And for those that call this online campus your home, all you have to do is click on the link in the chat, and we will contact you with the ways that you can serve the online campus from wherever you are. Or you can just drop me an email at mark.tapscott@pccwired.net. Now, if you call one of our physical campuses home, next time you're there, stop by the Information Center, and one of our guest services Dream Teamers will be glad to let you know about the opportunities at that campus. We'll see you next week. Have a great week.
Yeah, I'm living the life.